Breaking news report involving the federal probe of Congressman Matt Gaetz. The New York Times has a new report on Gaetz's efforts to head off that investigation in the final days of the previous administration. The Times' Maggie Haberman shares a byline in the story, joins us now by phone. So what have you learned about the attempt to get a pardon?
So, Anderson, the way it's been described to us by multiple people who are familiar with what took place is that Gaetz did two things. Publicly on Fox News, and I think he tweeted it, he said that the former president should pardon literally everybody. I think he mentioned the Thanksgiving turkey. He talked about Joe Exotic, that because in his words, the quote-unquote liberal crowd was going to come after allies of the president. There was also a private conversation that he had with White House officials about a blanket pardon. He wanted one for himself. He was suggesting one for allies of his in Congress. We're not sure specifically who. White House officials thought it was bizarre and knocked it down pretty quickly. Now, remember, this was not what we're told is that White House officials did not know specifics about what Gaetz was under investigation for at that point. We don't know how much Gaetz knew, but we do know that at that point it was clear that his friend, this tax collector in Florida, himself was under investigation related to issues regarding young girls or young women. So all of this paints this picture of somebody who sought a blanket pardon, ostensibly because he thought he'd be targeted because of the former president. But now allies of the former president are looking back on it and questioning whether this was an effort to protect himself because he knew what was going on. So he has, I should just note, denied wrongdoing.
So you don't know if he for sure knew that there was this investigation, but he was aware, according to your reporting, that this person he was linked to, the tax collector, was under some form of investigation.
Correct.
And so the White House, they didn't take this seriously at the time?
The officials in the White House who learned of it thought it was very strange. They were perplexed by it. They didn't want to go ahead with it. They thought, among other things, it would set a bad precedent, and it died fairly quickly. Now, then President Trump was aware of this request. It's not clear whether he had a specific conversation with Gaetz directly, but it was not something that the former president pushed for Gaetz either, as far as we know.
And what does Gaetz's office say to all this?
Gaetz's office has acknowledged that he talked publicly about receiving a pardon. They have maintained that, he was not doing so because he was under investigation for this latest issue. And we will learn more as we go. But at minimum, it is of note that he was seeking this blanket pardon at a time when an associate of his was in legal trouble.
Maggie Haberman, it's fascinating reporting. Thank you. There's more reporting now on how Gaetz is trying to save his political career. We're joined by senior legal affairs correspondent Paula Reed. So in the midst of all the controversy, Congressman Gaetz is actually fundraising off the possible federal charges, right?
That's right, Anderson. In an email today, he accuses the media of publishing lies and dragging his dating life into their political attacks. He then asks for money to help him fight back. And despite the federal sex crimes investigation and the separate allegations, he shared pictures of nude women with other lawmakers while on the floor of the House. We're also learning that Gaetz is scheduled to speak at an event put on by Women for America First at a Trump resort in Florida on Friday.
So this associate of Congressman Gaetz, a former county official in Central Florida named Joel Greenberg, who is facing charges including sex trafficking of a minor, he's pleaded not guilty. He'll be in court on Thursday. Do we know anything about how that might impact Gaetz?
He's so central to all of this because Greenberg is Gaetz's longtime friend and political ally. The investigation into Gaetz is actually part of a larger inquiry into sex trafficking that resulted in Greenberg being indicted. Now, Greenberg is the former tax collector in Seminole County, Florida. He was arrested last summer and charged with a litany of crimes, including ID theft and sex trafficking. And the federal investigation is currently looking at whether Greenberg and Gaetz sought out women online and then exchanged gifts or money for sex. Greenberg and Gaetz were also recorded by security cameras several years ago, entering the tax collector's office and rifling through some confiscated driver's licenses. Now, Gaetz has denied any wrongdoing, and Greenberg has so far pleaded not guilty. But on Thursday, Greenberg's case is back in court for a hearing on new charges. alleging that he embezzled more than $400,000 and then used the money to buy cryptocurrency and sports memorabilia. Greenberg doesn't have to be in court on Thursday, but the charges against him, Anderson, they're adding up. And there is now increasing pressure on him to flip on Gaetz. And that is one of the big things we're going to be watching for as we cover that case from Orlando for the rest of the week.
All right. Appreciate it, Paul Reed. Thanks. Perspective on all this now from former U.S. Attorney and CNN senior legal analyst Preet Bharara. So, Preet, I want to get your reaction to what we learned from Maggie Haberman. First of all, does it change anything for you, the idea of him seeking blanket pardons?
Well, it's another crazy story. I mean, we were up late on the last day of Trump's presidency trying to see who he might pardon, and we were thinking about people that he might preemptively pardon, including his family members and including himself, and didn't know that this was something that was maybe on the table. But what I think is really a dangerous sign for Matt Gaetz, a couple of things. One is, as the reporting just suggested, you have this individual, Mr. Greenberg in Florida, who, as the charges keep mounting against him, and he's facing more and more jail time as additional counts are brought to bear against him, the easiest way for him to avoid jail time, as we've seen in other cases as well, is for him to flip. And who to flip on? Who better to flip on with federal prosecutors than a sitting member of Congress? So that's bad, because all the incentives are in favor of him cooperating. There's perhaps audio recordings. We know that there's surveillance footage. He can fill in the gaps and connect the dots with respect to bad behavior on the part of Matt Gaetz that has been reported but not yet proven. And the second thing I would say is a lot of this reporting suggests that to the extent there was some interest on the part of people who knew Matt Gaetz and his bad conduct, alleged bad conduct, were in a position to remain silent. They're no longer remaining silent. Like it's not a coincidence that all these stories are leaking out about Matt Gaetz showing pictures of nude women and videos of nude women on the floor of the House, and that he might have sought this pardon. It seems like the floodgates have opened with respect to a lot of third-party witnesses who might have direct evidence of bad conduct and maybe even illegal conduct on the part of Matt Gaetz. Not a good sign for him.
Does the new reporting from the Times, does it only further highlight why it's a priority for the Justice Department to investigate and prosecute crimes by members of Congress? I mean, it's not necessarily political, but these are people who have sworn to uphold the Constitution, and they have access to presidents who are able to grant pardons.
Yeah, look, I think that there are two sides to that. There is always an incredibly important priority on prosecuting people who have taken an oath to protect the public and to serve the public, people in high office. There's also a need to be very, very careful and thorough and cautious because duly elected people deserve their day in court like everyone else and a presumption of innocence like everyone else. So you at the same time want to make sure that corrupt politicians are held to account, but also because they occupy a particularly special place in the government, having been elected, you want to make sure that you cross every T and dot every I.
Going back to the Greenberg hearing on Thursday, is there something you're going to be particularly looking at? I mean, if he was to make some sort of a deal, would that be revealed in court on Thursday?
It's possible. A trial date has been set. It's not too far off, as I understand it. And so what sometimes will happen with somebody in his procedural posture, the prosecutors could signal that they need more time. They could signal that there's a plea in the offing because you would have to plead guilty before you're signed up as a cooperator. So any shift in what's about to happen in the coming weeks and months with respect to Mr. Greenberg's case could be a sign that he is being very seriously considered and maybe even being signed up as a cooperator, which I'll say for the second time would be very, very bad news for Matt Gaetz.
Also, I mean, if this was done, if Mr. Greenberg or whomever was finding people online and making arrangements with them through websites and the like, and then there were payments being made, through, online payment systems or whatever, that's a pretty easy trail to follow.
Yeah, look, all the report, again, emphasizing this reporting and their great scoops from Maggie Haberman and her colleagues and others, it looks like Matt Gaetz is not the most careful human ever to have lived in America or to have served in Congress. He looks like he's left a trail. There's already the surveillance footage that was referenced before with respect to looking at those confiscated IDs at an office in Florida. He probably has telephonic communications. He probably has telephone calls. He probably has toll records that can corroborate what a cooperating witness might say with respect to meetings and illicit activities, sexual or otherwise, by Matt Gaetz. So, to to the extent they can get a live witness to say, these are the things that happened and these are the things I did with Matt Gaetz, and then you have corroborating electronic evidence to support that, I'll say for the third time, it's very bad for Matt Gaetz.
Yeah, well, we shall see. Preet Bharara, appreciate it. Thanks very much.